Welcome to the Tell Me It Will Be Okay podcast. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I've been working with kids and families for more than 3 decades. I've been a preschool teacher, a parent educator, a family case manager, a clinical counselor, and now I help parents of anxious kids at Open Book Parenting. That's openbookparenting.com. And through this podcast, Tell Me It Will Be Okay. And I can't promise you that it's going to be okay, but I can promise you that the meaning is in trying to figure it out and trying to understand and trying to be the parent we are meant to be and that our children need. And that's ultimately what this podcast is all about. Today, I wanted to talk about a concept I call judicious giving up. And it's something I ask parents to do pretty often, my clinical clients too. Judicious giving up sounds like giving up. But actually, judicious giving up is a way to let go so we can figure out what really matters and figure out what we want to do about it. Let me explain this a little bit further. When I was a brand new counselor, not even graduated from my graduate program, I was already seeing clients. The way it works in our training is while we're still in school, we have a practicum or an internship. And then postgraduate, 3,000 more supervised hours where we were meeting with a therapist with additional training in order to watch over us, make sure that what we were doing was kosher, was effective, etc. Help us discover the kind of clinician that we were going to be in our careers. So that is a whole lot of time that I spent doing therapy before I was a full-fledged therapist. At the very beginning, in my internship, when I was first doing therapy, I was super excited about being a therapist and fixing everything for everybody. Now, as I mentioned, I was a case manager previously, and case management is very solutions focused. Your client needs bus tickets and you hand them some bus tickets. Your client needs to fill out an application. You give them the assignment to fill out the application. You oversee them filling out the application. Maybe you even go and find the applications that they need to fill out. It is a very kind of productive thing. You are moving someone through a case plan to get from here to there. In my particular case, I was working with women escaping domestic violence. And so we were looking at housing, how to get housing, how to get on WIC, how to get welfare, how to get on Section 8 housing lists. It was very, very structured. And that felt great because you did the thing. You had a goal, you did the thing. That is how I came to therapy at first. So a client would come to me and say, I have a problem. And I would say, let us fix that problem. Let us come up with a plan to fix the problem. And that is not how therapy works. For one thing, sometimes the problem is not actually the problem. So the client comes to you and says, I'm coming to therapy because I hate my job. And as a case manager, you would say, let's come up with a plan about how to get out of that job and get into this other job. But as a therapist, you first have to figure out, is that really the problem? Is the problem that they hate their job and so need a new job? Or is the problem that they think they hate their job, but really it's that they're stuck in a difficult marriage? Or they think they hate their job, but really they hate their boss. But the answer isn't get a new job. The answer is to figure out why they've stayed there so long, or how they ended up there in the first place, or what does it mean to hate your job? Can they learn to hate their job but love their life anyway? It ends up being much more complicated. So a client says, this is my problem, and maybe it is their problem, or maybe it is their problem and something else, or something else entirely. And the first whole big part of therapy is figuring that out. Now, I should have known that because the very first time I came to therapy, when I think I was 18 or 19 years old, I reported that the problem I was having had to do with a lousy ex-boyfriend. Because what teenager hasn't had a lousy ex that is gumming up the works? But as I dug into things with my therapist, it turned out I had, no surprise, some family of origin issues that I needed to explore, come to grips with, and figure out how that was actually what was keeping me stuck in the lousy relationship that I thought was my actual problem. This is true when it comes to parenting things too. Parents come to me and say, I have a problem with my child. My child is having a problem. And maybe that's true and maybe it isn't. We have to figure it out. And very often, the problem is not quite the problem. The problem isn't one that we need to solve, it's one that we need to tolerate and understand and put in its proper place. Maybe a parent comes to me and says, my child will not sleep alone. And that is a very typical problem for anxious kids. Anxious kids who have some separation anxiety will be struggling to sleep. Generally, anxious kids whose brains wake up to their anxiety at night, we all know that feeling of waking up at 4 a.m. and worrying about something. Those kids, they wake up, they're anxious, or they go to bed and those anxieties start running around in their brain, and they want us to be with them. The problem is, ostensibly, that the child won't sleep alone. But actually, the problem is bigger than that. It's that our child is anxious, and we have to figure out how we are going to attend to and care for a child with anxiety. That's part of the problem. The other problem is what is happening for us when our child is anxious and does not want to sleep alone. And as we explore that, it will help us understand how we got stuck in that parenting pitfall of laying down with our child every night. It's interesting. Not every parent with an anxious child who does not want to sleep alone ends up laying down with their child every night. Some parents are able to tackle that pattern of anxiety more effectively than others. Some people don't get stuck in it at all. Some people get stuck in it for a really long time. Now, the way I look at things, I don't start with the assumption that the parent should or should not be operating in any particular way. And that allows me to just listen further about what's going on with the family. Because frankly, some parents will come to me and say, the problem is my child won't sleep alone. And then as we work through this problem, we realize that's not actually a problem for the family. So the child isn't sleeping alone, but the parent then comes to the conclusion, that's not where I want to do the anxiety work. I'd rather do it over in this area. So even though I felt like as I came in here, I should make my child sleep by themselves, in talking to you, I realized I'm okay with lying down with them every night, but I would like them to be able to get out the door to school a little more easily. I'd rather work on the separation there than the separation here. And you know what? That's fine. There are lots of places that we can explore and work on anxiety. It doesn't have to be in any particular place to start. That is a very personal decision for every family. So the judicious giving up in this would be, let's give up on trying to make your child sleep alone and instead focus more on the separation in the morning. That would be judicious giving up. I'm giving up in this one area so I can work on this other area. We only have capacity, and when I say we, I mean ourselves and our children, to do what we can where we can. We can't do all the things all at once. Another way we might judiciously give up on making our child sleep alone, that is our goal. That is definitely what we want as a family, is to have a child who is able to go to bed alone and stay in bed alone and sleep through the night. But that's not going to happen right now. It's just too much and it's too hard for us or for our child. And so I'm going to judiciously give up on that and take it in smaller bites. This might be because our child's feelings about it are too big and too much, and we need to take it in smaller bites. But it might also be that for us, it's just too much. Maybe in the evenings, we're much too tired. I just can't even deal with it. I'm so exhausted at the end of the night. It's just easier this way. So I want it to work, but not yet, not now. And figuring out if it's our issue or our child's issue is part of what we're working on. So if we judiciously give up on that specific goal, say, we're not even going to tackle that yet, we're just going to explore it. We're not going to problem solve for it yet. First, we're just going to try to understand why it's a problem. Is it our child's big behaviors? Do they seem like this is just asking way too much of them right now? Or is it our response to it? Does it trigger some of our own feelings of being alone as a child, alone in our bed during a thunderstorm, or hearing our parents go to sleep and feeling isolated in the dark? Do we have to work through some of that before we can ask our child to meet this challenge as well? That would also be judicious giving up, because we realize the work is bigger and more complicated than we thought. Like my client who comes to me and says, the problem is I hate my job. Maybe that's not the problem. Maybe it's that you thought you could only work this kind of job and you have to craft a new identity for yourself to be the kind of person who works a different sort of job. Maybe you always thought you were an accountant and actually you think you want to scoop ice cream. But what does it mean to leave being an accountant and become someone who scoops ice cream? What would that be like out in the world? By the same token, we need to understand, how does this change my identity as a parent? If I'm not lying down with my child at night, do I think of myself as less caring or meaner or someone without empathy? We have to look at that. We have to explore it. And again, that means giving up on this is the plan. This is one of my, frankly, many problems with the sort of behaviorist way we tend to look at parenting. I think this is fueled in part by very one size fits all, quick snack delivery of TikTok and Reels, this belief that every problem can be broken down into tiny, solvable, step by step, 1, 2, 3 pieces. And my experience in working with thousands of families is that's just not true. I may have 10 families come to me and say, the problem is my 8-year-old won't sleep alone. And there might be 10 different reasons that are driving this challenge. And every parent needs a unique look at what's happening for them. What is happening for that child developmentally? Where are they in their development? What kind of child are they? Are they more or less sensitive? Are they more or less intense? That's going to color the way their parents parent them. By the same token, who are you as a parent? What are your values that are driving your feeling that this child should be sleeping alone? Why does it matter to you? And I don't mean in a, why does it even matter to you? I mean in a, why does it matter to you? So I can also understand from that values place so that I can deliver support that respects those values, honors those values, and includes those values. Because you deserve solutions that fit your family spiritually, emotionally, and in the context of what's happening for you. Right now, as I record this, we have just had the time change. We have just sprung forward an hour. And for lots and lots of families, springing forward an hour creates some chaos in their home. They have kids that are very rhythmic, which means kids who really stick to a schedule, or kids who are very tuned in to change, and any little detail can throw them off their groove. Or maybe the parent is like this. And so that might not be a time to tackle that issue. On the other hand, maybe it is, because your family does not look like anybody else's family. It depends on who else is in the family. Are there other siblings who need specific kind of bedtime support? Are there other siblings who will miss out on much needed sleep if you decide to tackle it with this sibling and now is not the time to do it? Maybe you want to wait until the summer because your schedule will be different. Or maybe it's better to do it now before summer comes and your schedule changes a lot. Maybe your family is too stressed by other events. Maybe you're very tense right now. Maybe you're concerned about what's happening out in the world, and that's making you feel extra shaky or extra sensitive. Or maybe because of what's happening in the world, you want more cuddling with your child right now. The thing about parenting problems is they will reoccur over and over again as we work through them and as we work to solve them. By which I mean, if you have a child who struggles with separation, likely that struggle will reoccur at different times in your parenting journey with them. You might have a 3-year-old who sobs when you leave them at preschool, an 8-year-old who wants you to lay down with them, and a 14-year-old who texts you throughout the school day checking in, into a college student who calls and says, I'm homesick and I want to come home. Each time you have the opportunity to revisit that particular crisis for your child and for yourself. I say this not to discourage you, but to say that another kind of judicious giving up is to give up on the idea that this is a one-shot deal, that you have to get it right, and that if it comes up again, it's proof you haven't gotten it right. Instead, every time it comes up, you get to learn about yourself more. Your child gets to learn about themselves more, and you both get to acquire new skills, not just in the context of your relationship, but in the context of who you are and will be throughout your lives. Judicious giving up means understanding that your child's functioning is not necessarily reflective of your parenting, that good kids with great parents still have struggles, that you can't parent so well that you won't sometimes feel like you're failing, that you'll feel like you're letting your kid down. I must be the worst parent ever because look at what's happening with my kid. Judicious giving up is understanding that parenting itself is a challenge. It just is. Parenting is a relationship we have with our child. It is also the act of caring for and making decisions about our child and our family and ourselves. And sometimes we're going to get it right, and sometimes we're going to get it wrong. It's all about how we learn from it, how we bring self-reflection to it, how we understand that parenting, like history, may not repeat itself, but it does indeed rhyme. So you get to give up on parenting so well that it will never be a struggle. And instead, you can see the struggle as a message from your child, from yourself, that there's something new to learn here. There's something new to explore. It's not as easy as just getting a new job. You have to figure out, why is this bothering me? What is this about me? Is it crossing the line of my values? Is it triggering some loss in me? Is it challenging my identity of who I thought I was? Is it challenging my idea of what parenting was supposed to be or who my child was supposed to be? The idealized child I had in my mind? Do I have to give up an idea about that? And that's an opportunity for growth. As a parenting so-called expert, my thoughts are that parenting is meant to help us grow. The growing is right in front of you in the context of this relationship you have with your child. That's where the growing is. When you are struggling and you feel like this is taking time from me, it is, but that is where the time is meant to go. You don't have to leave the parenting relationship in order to grow. That is the opportunity offered to us in this experience with our child. So even if our child is the problem, they're not clearing the dishes, they're having tantrums and meltdowns every night, they are struggling to get off to school, that does belong to them, but it also belongs to us, not because they're the problem, but because how we feel about it, what it brings up in us, what we try to do, what we fail to do, what we have to understand, that belongs to us. Judicious giving up means we can also judiciously give up on the idea that we can fix our kid. Kids aren't broken, so they don't need fixing. You're not broken, so you don't need fixing. Judicious giving up on fixing means we can just sit in the brokenness to understand more, to understand ourselves, to understand our child. The first place I ask people to start when we judiciously give up on solving a problem and instead commit to being in the problem is, what is going on for you about it? How is this a struggle for you? Why is this a struggle for you? In what way is your child violating your idea of how things ought to be? Or in what way are you violating your idea of what things ought to be? Let's think about what ought to be. What did we expect? What do we have to lose when we give up on that expectation? Judicious giving up, what does it mean when we give up? How can we explore that, understand our feelings about it, grieve the loss of the thing we're giving up, even if it's just an evening alone without a kid hanging on you? Let's talk about it. And then once we've really explored those values, understand why it matters to you, we ask, is this still the goal? And if you say, yep, my child needs to sleep alone because I value time to myself and I need that in the evening. I need that to recharge. Once you understand that, it's a whole lot easier to commit to, I need this to happen. It's important. And then we explore, what are the values that have prevented you from taking action so far? And maybe it's a value of compassion. Maybe you feel like a compassionate parent would continue to lay down as long as the child needs it. And so you have to think about, can I still be compassionate and get time to myself? Is it necessarily cruel to let a 8-year-old sleep by themselves, even though they really want you there? We would explore that. And I would argue that helping an 8-year-old learn to sleep by themselves is a perfectly reasonable, developmentally appropriate task. Who is your child right at this minute? Can an 8-year-old reasonably be expected to sleep by themselves? And the answer is yes, we know that. We have scads of information about child development. So we can think about that. Is there a difference between asking a 2 or 3-year-old to do it and an 8 and 9-year-old to do it? Of course. Are the skills that we're asking an 8 and 9-year-old to build reasonable skills to ask of them? Of course. So then we say, okay, we know our child is capable developmentally. This is a reasonable expectation. But then we try to figure out, my kid is more than just every 8-year-old. They're also themselves. So then we explore, who is this child? Why is it especially difficult for this child? So that we understand, what are the skills this particular child needs? What are we asking of them? The skills this 8-year-old needs might be different than the skills that 8-year-old needs. Maybe this 8-year-old needs to learn some positive self-talk, and that 8-year-old needs to learn how to deal with dysregulation. Maybe another 8-year-old is just kind of in the habit and just needs more practice. So we create a plan based on that particular 8-year-old that it meets your values, because everything needs to be in there. And then we come up with our plan based on what we know, the evidence of what is helpful for kids to get to sleep by themselves. And again, lots of research about that. It's pretty clear. The plans are pretty clear, but how we execute that plan depends on your values and who that child is. We must give up on that big goal and sit in the problem. And that's also judicious giving up. And we do that for every parenting challenge. As you learn how to do this process, how to reflect, how to self-reflect, how to explore what it means to you and who your child is in that moment and who they always are and have been and will continue to be, it gets easier and easier to make parenting decisions. It doesn't mean executing those decisions gets easier. That can always be a challenge, but the challenge is where we grow. But it does mean you start having the answers in yourself. You don't have to look outwards and have the world tell you what ought to be. Instead, you can rely on this informed, educated, reflective, and compassionate mindset of who you are, who your child is, who you are both meant to be. That is what judicious giving up means. It means slowing down. It means understanding the problem may not be the problem. It means giving up on solving the problem and instead being in the experience of having the problem. Let me tell you that when you change your mindset that way and you no longer see these problems as problems, and instead you see them as part of the whole experience, the holistic experience of parenting, then everything gets a little easier, because you no longer say, oh my gosh, I'm failing. You say, oh, here is yet another opportunity for growth. And that's a different way of looking at things. I hope this reframe gave you some room for yourself and for your child, and change the way you approach this as a problem, whatever this is. And if you would like help in exploring problems, I hope that you will reach out. If you found this podcast helpful, it would be great if you would rate and subscribe or share it with a friend who might also learn and feel some support by listening. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.